Boston Louie Seymour was one of New England's most colorful, energetic, and successful car owners. During the years when my career as a journalist was beginning, I was there with Boston at places like Reading, Syracuse, IRP, Phoenix, and the mile in Indianapolis, the mile dirt. And I saw at that time firsthand the enormous respect that he had earned among the drivers, the crewmen, and most importantly, the other car owners in the United States Auto Club. When Boston was a kid, he went to big league races with his father. It was a time when somebody who loved automobile racing could go sit in the stands and watch midgets 7 nights a week, and of course you could go on Sunday afternoon and see them at that time as well. There were big car races, and young Louie Seymour saw a lot of that racing from seats in grandstands in those days. And it was from those seats that Boston's affection for top classes was born. He was quoted in a 1982 story in Open Wheel magazine saying, "Once I saw A.J. Foyt backing her in at Williams Grove in the high bank battles of Winchester, there was nothing else I wanted to do." And so for his entire career as a car owner, Boston Louie fielded fast, sophisticated, open wheel cars for the best and most sought-after drivers of the day. He began as a car owner in the late 1950s at age 31, quarter midgets for his 2 boys. Then in 1965, he formed a partnership with Bill Deacon with the objective of going off with some real race cars, and they started out with a Champ dirt car. The following year, they bought a sprint car. But Boston's real partners were the people who were fascinated with his style, his limitless energy, and the adventure of racing all over America out of a little backyard garage in the East Coast. The core team was family. Wife Ellie was there every race. Sons Mike and Bobby were in the pits twirling wrenches and rubbing elbows with people like A.J. Foyt and the other stars of the Indy 500. 3 daughters, Mary Lou the oldest, Lois middle, and Celeste the youngest. At least one of the 3 of them could be found in the grandstands with Mom at most races, and frankly, sometimes you could go in the middle of nowhere and there was Boston with his 2 boys, his 3 daughters, and his bride all at his side. Others like Eddie Longname, whose real last name was Havajimian, were key to the team. So was Diesel, who's here tonight. His real name is Dominic Inferrara. Longname built the engines by hand in a tiny shop just beside Route 128. Those engines were the match and often tied best built by the finest shops that had unlimited budgets. Longname never charged Boston for his labor. He just liked being part of that team. He liked going to the races, being part of Boston's extended family. Diesel, of course, he drove the truck. Then there was Dirty Dave Ciancio. He was a big help. And the guy who would drink beer as he lettered the car, O.J. Dragway McKinney. All these people were drawn by Louie Seymour's magnetic personality and the great racing adventure that he was experiencing. 30 years ago, in 1976, Boston won the USAC Silver Crown Championship with Billy Casella as his driver. The season had come down to the very last race of the year. At Syracuse, tension was high that day. Score 1 for the little guy, Boston Louie, because all the top teams were there and more than a few had a shot at that title. But Boston's sprint cars, those were really his trademark. Black with a gold number 29 on the tail tank. They were driven by Ziggy Snyder, Greg Weld, Scratch Daniels, Bruce Walkup, Johnny Parsons Jr., Eddie Levitt, Sheldon Kinzer, Roger Rager, but especially Billy Casella, with whom Boston enjoyed enormous success and developed a wonderful friendship. Boston Louie's trips to America's heartland and even California for active competition in USAC's Thunder and Lightning series of sprint car racing meant long tows that went deep into the night and then the next day into the daylight. And he did that more than 10 years, towing 100,000 miles and more a year. Do the math. 10 years, 100,000 miles a year. That guy towed sprint cars 1,000,000 miles during a decade. He was fortunate to have had a new car dealership as a sponsorship, because every year the truck was gone come September or October when the season finished. And there was the time when young Mike, at age 16, just gotten his license, driving the truck, tire blew, everything went upside down. Boston Louie pinned inside in the back of the truck, tools, toolboxes, all sorts of things. Fortunately, he escaped with only minor burns. It was a wonderful and a colorful time in sprint car racing. It was a time of the incredible Larry and Gary show with Larry Dixon and Gary Bettenhausen, each trying to outbrave the other. And the courageous ones, like Lee Kunzman, who came back to race again after horrible injuries. Many were they who made the trip to the hospital instead of victory lane during this era of abnormally brave drivers and extraordinarily dedicated car owners. Many were those whose lives ended in the wreckage of a twisted sprint car. Ironically, Boston Louie was better known out of town than he was here in New England. And during those days of drama, danger, and million-mile tows, our family man from Marlborough, Mass. did what nobody else from our part of the world had done before nor since. Through his own hard work, with the help of friends and family, he gave his all in order to successfully compete against the best of the day, wherever they may have been. In 1981, he and Roger Rager made a run at the Indianapolis 500 with an old car and a small block Chevy engine bolted together by who else? Eddie Longname, and they almost made the race. But it's the variety of events in which Boston Louie earned the first place trophy that's so impressive. He and his crew won in USAC midget competition on pavement. He won on the flat dirt track at Terre Haute in a sprint car, with Ken Schrader driving 3 times in the Copper Classic at Phoenix in a Silver Crown car. Flat asphalt tracks, Toledo and Sandusky, Ohio, in sprint cars. High bank asphalt tracks, the terrorizing joints at Winchester and Salem in sprint cars. The bank dirt track at Eldora. And even indoors, where in December of 1985, Ken Schrader wheeled a midget prepared by Boston Louie to the checkered flag. But he won the biggest of all at the time, the Hullman Classic, 3 times. In its day, the Hullman was the #1 sprint car event of the year. It was so big, the race was broadcast live on ABC Wild World of Sports. In 1971, Boston won the first ever Hullman with Ziggy Snyder at the wheel. The following year, he won it again, this time with Bruce Walkup as his driver. And the final year the event was on television was 1980, and Eddie Levitt won, driving for Boston Louie. And this, for many years, the opening of Wide World of Sports included footage of a black sprint car tumbling end over end the length of Terre Haute's backstretch. The driver, Billy Casella, the guy who owned the car, Boston Louie Seymour. Well, Casella had been auditioning for a ride and had turned some laps for Boston that day and had done pretty well, passed a lot of cars, but he was just absolutely bound and determined he was going to go as fast as that car could possibly go, and he went a little faster than that. Middle of the week, Casella called thinking that his ride surely was over since he had demolished the car, and wanted to know how things were going and who was going to drive it that weekend. And Boston Louie said, "Why, bring your helmet, you're driving it," because I never saw anybody pass that many cars before he crashed. And they were together ever since. They trusted each other, Casella and Boston, so much so that Boston would stand in the turn at the entry to the turn and be a personal marker of where he wanted Casella to lift, and not any sooner. Casella was either incredibly brave or something was missing somewhere, because he would wait until he got right to Boston Louie before cracking the throttle. They had an incredible partnership that lasted so very long. The sprint car racing in their era was a dangerous business. And at Winchester, the partnership ended. Casella and Dana Carter got into it at about 130 miles an hour, and the 2 sprint cars crashed down the straightaway in a crash that all but destroyed Casella's arm. They had been leading USAC sprint car points going into that event. But that was the end. Casella was out for good. Not Boston. He never quit racing. He was at IRP for a race in 1996, literally weeks before he died at the all-too-young age of 69. He was inducted into the Sprint Car Hall of Fame in Iowa in 2004. Boston Louie Seymour's accomplishments and his character surely make him worthy of entry into this Hall of Fame as well. His family is here to receive the honor.
This is just fantastic to be here. 2 years ago, we went out to Knoxville to the Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and it was just a wonderful feeling to know that all those miles that he traveled and we traveled along with him, it's really unbelievable that all these people saw that. And the one thing I'd like to say, though, all the miles that he traveled and the races that he won, I told Dick Bergen this before, not many people really knew him until Dick Bergen, who had known him for a long time, started writing about him. And like Jimmy McGee was saying, you know, this part of the country isn't as well known as Indiana or California or whatever for racing. But we had it in our back pocket. We had Dick Bergen, the writer of Open Wheel magazine, and when he wrote about Boston, that's what made it all possible for Boston to be Boston Louie. So Dick, thank you very much for what you did for him, and I just thank everybody here today for honoring him and the selection committee. There's just so many drivers out there that made him what he was. You know, Dick talked about a lot of them, but I'd also like to say that here today, there's two of them that I saw, and two of them that a lot of people may not know drove for Boston. And one of them over here is Danny Zimmerman, and he drove for him in 1967, I think it was, a couple times, and did a great job for him. And I know he would appreciate Danny being here. And also a guy that I really liked, Nicky Fenoro, drove for him and won a race up at Star Speedway. And Nicky did a great job that night. And he told me last night, I know he went to bed about 4 this morning after the NEMA party, but to have him here today, that's really special, even though he's only got one arm there. But thanks, Nick, for coming. Thank you all for staying this long, and we really appreciate what you've done for us here today. Thank you.